So it's 2019, right? I wake up one morning and I get this text from Kirk, and he says, "Hey, Jer, you want to talk about miracles?" And he says, "Get this for a miracle. I just healed a man in my own power." And I was like, "Whoa, Kirk, that's weird. What are you talking about?" I said, "We should talk about that on air." No, up until him healing a man in his own power was true. He texted me and said, "Should we talk about miracles?" And that just piqued my interest. Do you know how to spell milk toast?
Miracles. All right. Let me give a little bit of a preface on why I wanted to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, pause for a second. Perfecto. Oh, right. I used the wrong email address. Dang it. Okay. So in the episode called Harder Than It Sounds,
Easier said than done.
Sorry, yeah. Easier said than done.
In the episode called Rolling Stone Gathers No Moss. No, wait.
Okay. You know, we really have to get our podcast consultant that names these things to do a better job of letting me know what they're called.
Yes.
All right. Edit.
Nah.
All right. In the episode called Easier Said Than Done, we talked about our spiritual journeys, where we are at the moment, what's going on, all that kind of stuff, and go back and listen to it and get caught up with that. But in it, at the end, we were kind of asking the question, where are we now? And for me, I talked about how over the last decade or so, my faith has moved and expanded and gotten bigger and more inclusive, and I really, really like it. And it's been an awesome journey. And in the process, God has gotten very big, and I think that's a good thing because I think God is very, very big. But the place in my journey that I'm at is now that that's happened, I'm trying to rediscover what does it mean for God to be small as well. And what I mean by small is engaged, or where does my life intersect with this big God, and what does that look like? And within the Christian faith, to me, one of the most compelling parts of the Christian faith is this idea that God came to earth to do something, to show us something, to participate with us. I think we call this the incarnation, and I think it's a absolutely incredible part of the whole narrative. But what it is God became a particularity, was bound by time and space, was conditioned into a particular culture and a particular very, very, a person named Jesus.
Yeah.
So God got small without losing God's bigness. And so what does that look like for me today as I've allowed my God to get bigger and bigger and bigger, or the God to get bigger and bigger and bigger? How do I now experience God in that small way? And there are ways in which I think that's happening, but if I had to articulate the growth area, the growth spot for me now, it would be in that idea. And so as I've been thinking about that, I've been pondering this idea of what does it mean for God to intervene, intersect, participate in the now. And when that happens, we tend to call those miracles. Now, not every version of it do we call miracles, but so it sort of raises this question, do I believe in miracles? And to ask that question, I've realized that I want to actually wonder, what do I mean when I say miracle?
Right.
What is a miracle? And back in seminary, I had one of my friends ask me the question. He said, it really comes down to, do we believe in a closed system or an open system? Meaning, do we believe that God is outside of the system that we live in, and is distant in some way? Or do we believe, and that if God from outside the system interacts with the system in what we call a miracle, it's actually working somehow outside of the laws of nature? Like maybe even God is violating the law. Violating is a strong word, but suspending them maybe, and interacting. Or Or do we believe in more of a system where God is in it?
Mm-hmm.
God is part of the system, and so and God is working. I mean, what I mean by that is God is working within the system, and so in some ways, miracles either suspend or violate or interrupt what is explainable, or are miracles explainable? And I was listening to, actually, it was in the Christian episode we talked about from the liturgist, and they were talking about someone had a spiritual experience, and they said, they saw a vision, and then I think it was actually Lisa Gunger who said this. She said, and I don't know if I was hallucinating or and Science Mike jumps in and goes, well, of course you were hallucinating. That's what visions are. That's a God working within the system. It's
Right.
explainable. It's explainable. We call them hallucinations. We can actually map brain chemistry during the vision and see what's going on. And so we can, given enough technology and enough knowledge, you could explain any miracle. Or is a miracle something that by definition is unexplainable?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that distinction really, really matters when having this conversation, because it comes down to, do we believe a God that whose actions are always unexplainable, and the more we learn, the more knowledge we get, the more distant God becomes, because God is really the thing we use to fill all the gaps in our knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I personally reject that idea.
Yeah.
So that means that our miracles, things that we just don't know how to explain yet, but we can, and that God is operating within our system. And just, I think what I believe, but man, not every miracle story matches that at all.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
So what's a miracle? That's the kind of the starting point. What's our definition for that?
Yeah. That's a great question. Because I am definitely.
Now, you have a pedigree on this. You've got some credentials that we should probably talk about.
This is true. I went to school. I went to Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. There were just too many options of ways to describe it that I just decided for the actual one. Where studying or exploring the miraculous is, I guess, a what do you call them? It's like your GE courses. It's it's prescribed reading. It's a requisite course.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so there's a bit of that, but it's funny. Even from having been in BSSM during that time, I may have had a very different answer, and it may have been seemed a little more, I don't know, sure and concise or whatever. And now I would say I probably err on the side of both, and as far as what you were talking about within our system and outside of, supernaturally above nature, outside of what happens naturally. I think, yeah, for sure both. But and this is where I think we have some responsibility as people who talk about and believe and try to live with an invitation of the miraculous or whatever that means, like it can turn in, like anything can, it can turn into like, I think there's been a lot of irresponsibility in kind of tracking, let's say, miraculous healing and stuff. My natural brain would want to go, okay, wait, but did you check it out? Not from a skeptic's perspective, but just from like let's be responsible with this and make sure we're calling a spade a spade. Not that God needs us to do that to like validate whatever he did or didn't do or something. But I think there's just a level of responsibility where it either thins the meaning out so much that it's kind of like, okay, well, yeah, like 20 miracles happen. I mean, it's kind of like, okay, so obviously I have a bit of jadedness in me surrounding the church and everything, but take that with a grain of salt, because I do love the church. It's like when I go to churches and they will put on the screen, how many salvations happened in the last year, or how many, whatever. And it's a church where it's like, okay, with every head bowed, I'm going to pray. If this is you, raise your hand. It's like, yes, I see that. Yes, yes, yes. I see that hand. And it's like, I guess there's someone like with the little clicker, like back in the day, click, 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 what I mean? There's something, I don't know, I'm not trying to really, but that has to happen. I've seen it where it's like there were 600 something salvations, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, let's say, I peek like everyone does, and I see like a person 2 over from me, and I like see them raise their hand, and I'm kind of like, and then they just left at the end of the service. I'm like, What did that mean to you? What did that mean to you? Because I think most of us assume when you put on the board, it says 600 and something salvations this year. I'm like, okay, you understand that means most people think that means is they're not going to hell. Like, and I sat 2 rows over from them and watched them raise their hand, and that was what it took. That was it.
That's it. That's all it takes. It's a little magic prayer, right?
It's a password, in fact.
It is. Right. It's your credentials. Wait, it's in my LastPass, and I have an app that saves all those moments, and I now am safe. And
so at the same time, I think that's dangerous territory for me to go into like, yes, no, you did, you didn't, that was real. I mean, sure, that is between them and God and whatever, but there's a responsibility I would have there the same way. I remember talking to my grandpa saying, he was at one of the first Billy Graham crusades, and he was a pastor of a local church in the area, and to their credit, the Billy Graham Ministries Foundation, whatever, reached out to local churches. My grandpa was there kind of helping or something, and they said, okay, you are one of the ones that we are going to be connecting these people who either came forward with. And he said something like there were, for his region or something, there was like 40, 60 people or something like that. And he goes, do you know how many people came to my church? 1.
Yeah.
And he goes, you know how long they stayed after? Like, I don't know if they did or didn't, but it was that much. And that's okay. You got to leave room for those things. But that's the responsibility of talking about it in a way that's real and kind of,
So I would agree that, we're talking about what is a miracle. And one of the things I hear you saying is a lot of things that are called miracles probably aren't. Or I don't know if it's a lot, but we have to be careful with how we use this word and what we attach it to.
Right. So what do you think about this? So there's another, I remember thinking one day that I probably should have died about 10 times in my life.
Okay.
Things that happen. If not died, been a quadriplegic or a vegetable or something. I mean, I've landed on my head, snapped my back, nothing broke, just so many things, Yeah. And I thought, okay, how the difference between, let's say, someone tripping on something and falling and hitting their head and going into a coma versus I was like intentionally trying to do a double backflip off of that trampoline and like landed on my back on the edge of it, and that didn't happen. So is that just like a millimeter over where my spine didn't get kind of thing? And then how much do you go into that and say there is intentionality with angels, God, things, something,
Oh, you asking that? Yes, it's a millimeter to the left, and you would have been paralyzed.
Right,
so but that part of it is true. The why is, I think, the question, right? Was that an intervention by an angel or by something that actually prevented that from happening? And the problem I have there, or this has to me. This gets to the question of what are miracles for?
Right.
Which is, I think, another super interesting question.
Yeah.
If a miracle, if a millimeter to the left would have killed you, well, 2 feet to the right, you would have landed the jump, and you wouldn't have any pain at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure what you experienced in that moment was pain.
Mm-hmm.
So you were prevented from dying, but you were not prevented from pain. And so, I don't know.
Yeah, I think this.
So, what are miracles for becomes a really, really important question.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the other ways that I think people hold this conversation really poorly, is anything that works out, things that work out to my benefit are miracles, things that work out to my suffering are not. And we blame those on the devil, and then we blame the positive things on God.
Mm-hmm.
And then we say God is good at the end of that. So everything worked out, and it was amazing, so God is good.
Yeah.
Nothing worked out, it was horrible. And I know I'm being very black and white, and not everybody does this, and I'm just but that kind of thinking of, if it's bad, it wasn't a miracle, and if it was good, it might have been. And it's like, well, that's way too simple and so easy to pick apart and just go, no, that's not a thing.
I think
so. What is a miracle? And is there a miracle of suffering? Which many of the mystics would suggest absolutely. And then you look at the cross event, which if you follow that chain of logic, the idea that Jesus was raised from the dead, certainly a positive miracle. The idea that Jesus would be willing to die and that God could be killed, miracle. Like, that's just a miracle.
Right, and that's got to be
Right?
part of it for the latter to happen, the former to happen.
Totally. So, and it was all part of the plan. And so where does the miracle start and where does it stop? And is there a miracle of suffering? And of course, I haven't heard that one. I haven't heard that testimony
Right.
from our modern culture.
Yeah. Okay, so I got to go to the definition here just for ground baseline here.
And then from whom is this
is-
definition? We got to quote your source here.
What is it? Who does dictionary.com or the dictionary app? It's Merriam-Webster, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a Webster app.
Let's see. So number one definition is an effect or extraordinary event in the physical world that surpasses all known human or natural powers and is ascribed to a supernatural cause.
Right.
So-
the unexplainable.
Yeah, and number two
Right.
is such an effect or event manifesting or considered as a work of God, and number three is just a wonder or marvel. So that encompasses a lot, I think.
It does.
I almost think miracle has to be subjective, and I think that's okay that it is.
Well, okay, so if it's falling into the realm of spirituality, it's at least not provable. Is that true? It transcends provable is what I mean.
Yeah, surpasses all known human or natural powers, and is ascribed to a supernatural cause. So yes.
Yeah, that's what Wikipedia has basically the same entry point. A miracle is an event not explainable by natural or scientific law.
So then the interesting is when we think we can explain something,
It's no longer a miracle.
Yeah, but it's kind of like that old joke or the whole kind of like atheist and I can't remember the exact premise, but it's like an atheist and God are standing together, and he says, "Okay, I don't think." Something about like you're not God or something. I can't remember what it is, and it's like, okay, then you have to make man out of the dirt or something like that. And then
I think, yeah.
And
I've
then
heard
the
this
atheist
before.
goes to pick up the dirt and start to make it, and God goes, "No, you got to make your
you
own
have to
dirt
make
first."
the dirt.
Whatever, you know that. I can't
I do
remember
know.
the joke.
The problem is that is the worst on-air delivery of an explainer joke ever.
Yeah.
Okay, so a miracle has something to do. We've talked about them. We've talked about some of the problems, but that's not the question. The question is, do you believe in miracles? Do I believe in miracles? I guess is the question. And we'll get to the rest of it probably later, but let's just start there. So, using the definition of it's either an event that takes place that cannot be explained and maybe never will be able to explain, or an event that does take place and is explainable but has a transcendent purpose, meaning, connection to it.
Right.
Do you believe in miracles?
I would say absolutely then, because that definition actually almost becomes
pretty broad.
even more inclusive and broader than I would even give. I mean, think
All
of
right,
how many
do you
times in hospitals doctors are like, "We don't know. We don't know. That just happened." You know what I mean? And that may not even be like there were people there laying hands or whatever, but if that's all it is, there's plenty of things we can't explain. You know, highest in their field can't explain.
Yeah.
And I don't need to call those a miracle, but sure, throw them in there.
All right. So let's get away from the word miracle then. And I actually, by that definition, I totally believe in miracles. Always have, and one of the reasons that I consistently return to and participate in faith journeys, spiritual journeys, is because I actually don't want to exist in a world that is capable of being fully explained. I also don't think that world will ever exist.
Right.
So I'm not even pursuing it. I also don't want to live in a world where people aren't absolutely trying as hard as they can to explain everything.
Yeah.
So there's a significant difference between what I hope to call miracles and what I think superstition is. And keeping those two things separate, it can be very difficult, but I think it's a super necessary part of any spiritual pursuit. Anytime I'm exposed or I encounter the superstitious nature of humanity, right?
Yeah.
I want to eradicate that.
Yes, but then that's a blurred line, superstition versus just humans wanting and ascribing and needing and like both trying to exist in the faith realm versus also hiding in the like. It's all
Yeah.
just, that's hard.
It's not a clear line.
Okay, let me ask you. Oh, so you said yes, you believe in miracles.
Yes,
and you don't
I
wanna-
believe in miracles.
But no, here's the second.
All right.
What was the last miracle you can remember happening in your life or in your world? Would you say there is one?
Well, that gets
Given our definition.
Okay, so I don't. It's so funny because let me preface. Sorry. When I hear the word miracle, what I think of, what I've been conditioned and trained to think of, is momentary, spontaneous healing. For instance, right?
Sure.
Person had a broken leg. Person didn't have a broken leg. That kind of thing. What I actually want miracle to be is the process of God breaking through with wholeness into the human experience. I think that can include miraculous healing. I think but it commonly doesn't. So in my life, the most recent one is last week, 2 weeks ago, maybe it's been. My wife she found this deep splinter in my soul, and she came after it, which most people call an argument. And I was able to hear her. I was able to sit with it. It hurt. I didn't like it. I didn't like that it was true. I didn't understand it. It was a very, very old splinter that is part of things in my life I don't even always understand. Like, where did that come from? But I had partnered with it, and it had festered, and it had caused pain in her life, and I allowed her to pull it. And it only took 2 hours, an hour. It wasn't that long. This is the kind of argument that in the past we just would have called argument number 47 because we'd had it so many times.
Right.
And it was just easier just to number it and move on because they last for 3 months. And, it's just terrible. And like it transformed our relationship. Like it made way for the next phase, the next movement that we're making in our life. And it's just amazing to skip 3 months of fighting or to skip behavior that causes damage, right?
Yeah.
We didn't do that. That's a miracle to me. I feel more whole on the other side of that. Is that a miracle?
What you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Why?
I love this quote, and I don't know who said it. So every time I say this quote, I always say there's a guy who said, and I should look it up. And there, I prefaced again, I need to do that. A psychologist talked about the line between good and evil runs through the heart of every human. And I didn't used to believe that. I used to believe that your heart was good or evil. But now I'm pretty much on board with that idea. And anytime I make consistent movements towards the good, like there's a path in my heart that leads straight to the divine and a path that leads all the way to hell. And anytime I make a choice to move towards and into the divine, I think that's miraculous.
Yeah.
I think the work it takes to choose the divine, like the ability to receive love, right? I'm so self-critical as we all are. I'm so convinced at times, if you look at my behavior and the things I actually think, the things I don't go after because I'm hiding, like I'm amazed that I'm able to receive love and learn to love myself. And so to have a moment with my wife where she became the implement of a miracle in my life that will make me a better husband, a better dad, a better executive coach, and have access to a more rich and fulfilled life. I mean, that's heaven on earth.
I would agree.
Now, on New Year's Eve, I sprained my knee. I didn't tear a ligament. Sprained a ligament in my knee on a dance floor. Thank you very much. Just being an idiot and having fun and doing New Year's Eve stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I'm walking around with a limp. I'm in pain. I couldn't hardly stand on it the day after. And the pain of the splinter in my life versus the pain of that ligament, like they don't even compare. I haven't even thought to ask God to heal my knee. It's just painful, and I'll get over it. It'll be fine. And it'll have like a 30-day impact on my life. The splinters in my soul have affected me for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
Would you say the splinter was not as nearly as overt, or were you very cognizantly aware of it?
I am. So my wife and I, it's our central fight in our whole marriage has always been around money. Money is a battleground, not in every marriage, but it's common. It's one of the top three, and that's been ours because it represents how it represents resources. It represents how you spend your life and how you make decisions and what you value and all that kind of stuff. And just as an example, I tell a story about I used to get bonuses at work, and that was really exciting, right? You get a paycheck, and then you get an extra, thousands of dollars, and that's a great day.
Yeah.
And I began to learn that was actually a bad day because I would get this extra money. We were then going to fight about what it was for, and then we would both spend it. Which meant every bonus I just went in debt that much, right? Which isn't exactly true, but that's the gist of the idea. So that's what our fight has been about. It took us, I don't know, 15 years to build a marriage that could deal with the issues at that level. And we did, and we have, and we are. This was just another layer in that where, what was your original question? I wanted to give that backstory.
Well, the splinter versus the knee, which one is more overt, and were you aware of the splinter?
Right. So we've been married 24 years now, and so in the last decade or so, I've been very aware that this was a splinter. Prior to that, I just thought I was right. I just thought I had the high ground, right?
Yeah.
And if you listen to Dave Ramsey, yeah, I was right. Problem is, I was totally wrong. And so it was overt in our marriage for sure. And I can point to all kinds, because it's money, it's totally measurable. You can see absolutely every time it went sideways.
Yeah.
Right? It shows up in our finances, the decisions we make, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, totally overt. Yeah, the knee prevents me from walking, but it doesn't prevent me from doing most of what I need to get done in a day.
Yeah.
Money, totally been in the way, been a huge hurdle for us.
Yeah.
And it's where we've worked out our marriage. So yeah,
okay,
not a hidden thing at all. Deep.
Right. But so that's even more interesting how long you've lived with it, meaning kind of like, so when that splinter does get pulled, it's like, that absolutely feels like, because I talk about this in our workshops where, just advice giving, just the explainable or rational or logical response to pain, wounding, loss, hurt, all these things. It obviously is not what works. Otherwise, we would all just kind of go, oh yeah, I'm afraid. I have fear of, rejection, or I have fear of something. Why don't I just twist the dial? It's not for lack of understanding that, no, I'm afraid of something, or I'm hurt from this. I mean, and some of us, we don't have even that great of understanding about it, but it's not just a matter of, bloop, I'll tell you what's wrong with you, and I just change that thing. So there has to be some...
Okay. So this is part of my... Sorry, I
Go
totally
for it. Go.
over.
Well, you were more excited than I was getting, so you get to go.
This is part of my critique of spiritual cultures that pursue dramatic healings and miracles in that frame.
Mm-hmm.
Not that they're wrong and that those things don't happen, but my problem is this whole question about what is it for,
Yeah.
right? And how can a miracle be like for me to not feel pain anymore? And it's like they want it to just be this knob you turn,
Mm-hmm.
right? And emotional healing doesn't work that way. Why would physical? And I'm not saying it can't. Be careful about that. But this idea of if I just do the right thing, fill in the formula, blah blah blah, I just get to turn the knob and then I don't have to feel that pain. Well, that would be fantastic, but I don't see that in any other part of Christian theology being the way it works. And yet in healing culture, that's what the claim seems to be.
Yeah.
Like,
And except one of the interesting things is that's a huge chunk of what Jesus spent his time doing. I mean, or a
Totally.
good amount of like,
Yeah.
and I don't think he like went around actually. I mean, he did. I went to different cities and stuff, but it was just kind of, it's almost just a part of like, well, I'm going through this city, so people are going to get healed, like, you know, kind of thing. And and that happened, and then at least there's not a lot of recorded stories as to like an interrogation as to whether someone was deserving or whether something or whether the other. It just sort of happened to people here and there, you know. And so the why. I mean, the why, I guess, in that sense, was what like pointing to a higher reality, a kingdom, a manifestation of like being able to live on a different plane. I guess if, like, Jesus was the ultimate alchemist, you know, who could essentially create whatever.
Well, okay, so but think about this, because that's right. That is the biblical narrative of what Jesus did, and lots and lots and lots of people got healed. So that's cool. Think about the guy that was by the pool of Bethsaida.
Yeah.
Been laying there on this pallet. Friends bring him down, lay him there. He begs all day. They take him home. That's what he's done his whole adult life. One day, Jesus comes by and says, "Hey, dude, get up and walk." And the guy does. Now, that's a good day.
Right.
Right? That's
Right.
amazing. Okay, what does that guy do the next day? Because he just lost his job. He is now unemployed.
Mm-hmm.
He can't beg anymore. Well, clearly what he did is he went on a speaking tour because now he's got a story to tell. So he's probably fine.
Right.
Right? But just because someone goes from not being able to walk to being able to walk does not solve all their problems.
Right.
In fact, it creates a whole new list of them.
Yeah.
Which does not mean I think he should have not been able to walk in order to stay a beggar. That's not the point. But the point is, a physical healing like that does not solve all your problems.
Right.
Right? And the guy ended up dying of something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And got sick again.
Yeah.
And maybe he learned how to become a carpenter and hit his hand with his hammer at some point. Like, it didn't end all pain and suffering in his life. It ended that particular one.
Yeah.
But any change, this is in systems theory, we understand that a system gets organized in a particular way, and then the system works. That's what it does.
Mm-hmm.
If you change and have a significant change to any piece of that system, it breaks it. And that is experienced as a negative event to the system.
Yeah.
It does not matter if that change is positive or negative. That's not the point. It's just change. This is why winning the lottery can destroy people's lives.
Yeah.
It's a massive, quote, positive change, but big lotteries can be very, very damaging.
More often than not, in fact.
More often than not. Leads to bankruptcies, divorces, sometimes even suicide, all those sort of things.
Yeah.
Right? Because you just broke your system.
Yeah.
Dramatic healings like that can do that.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that you can't learn how to live into it and take responsibility for it.
Right.
But it doesn't solve all your problems.
Right. Right.
And so many prayers for miracles sound like, I just want my problem solved.
Right.
Because I do. I actually want my problem solved.
Right. Right.
Right?
I think miracle in and of itself is evidential of its own definition. Not being able to be explained, by what is known to humanity at the time. Miracle, I mean, I do think this, I don't, like I said, there has to be responsibility with it, and in a sense, that's why I think it has to be kind of subjective, because certain people are very comfortable and can live a life well, living in a more hyper-spiritual kind of, you know what I mean? And some people even myself, I have to be careful about that. I don't do too well. I have to have a different balance of kind of intellect and spirituality and where those kind of line up. But what we can't explain. I mean, why we all aren't. I mean, honestly, why we all aren't killed in our cars from people texting. Why we're not all dead is a miracle, and that one's like so easy to recognize. I mean, kind of joking, kind of not. I mean,
well, there is a lot of death in the world. I mean,
yes, exactly.
A lot of people are dying for things that are much even more random than that.
Right. But I'm a fan of miracles. Yes, but part of it is like that's why I'm like it's got to be subjective because I'm the same as you. I'm like,
what do you mean by subjective?
It has to be. Miracles are to Kirk what they are to you, and that's right. And they can be to me what they are to me, and that's correct. Now, they serve? Does it serve you well? Your sort of perspective on miracles that can be. I think that can be diagnosed sometimes. It's like that was not a miracle. You're actually just like living in La La Land. But then again, you kind of like got to go. I got to be really careful about who I decide to tell that to. You know, but I love the idea of miracles, and this is what I want to do too. Before we forget, I want to do an on-air experiment where we pray for your knee, and see what happens. I mean, not right now, but even ongoing. Like maybe I'll set a reminder to check in like 5 episodes from now. Like, Kirk, did your knee get miraculously healed? And if it didn't, okay, great. If it did, I don't know, but I kind of look at it from like a slightly scientific perspective, also. Like, just
I'm actually not going to receive that prayer.
Really?
No, I'm not, because of the not because of you and your intent and all that stuff.
Sure.
But the intent behind it,
as it being a
test of sorts, I don't think it tests anything about the conversation we're having. So if my knee healed, my knee will heal over the natural course of time. That's what my body is designed to do.
Right.
So how do we measure if it heals more quickly? Well, that would be if I never felt any pain after, like, in 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
That would be a miracle that's prescribed. But the question of what are miracles for then comes into play around, are we trying to do an on-air experiment to convince others? Like, what's the purpose of the test? If the test fails and my knee just heals over the natural course of time, have we proved that what?
Miracles don't happen? Or
no, we haven't.
Right.
If my knee did get healed in the moment, this is another interesting thing that I haven't figured this out. If my knee did get healed in the moment, what would that matter?
Well, it'd probably matter a decent amount to you.
Well, then we can do it off air. But here's another thing I haven't figured out. I've heard many credible stories of unexplained dramatic healings from people I trust and know. I heard one actually over the course of the holidays that was verified by doctors, like stupefied the doctors, right? And those testimonies don't go viral.
Right.
And yet, on the surface of it, it seems as though they absolutely should.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it appears as though the power of a miracle, the power of the testimony of a miracle, seems to have like a shelf life on it, or an influence radius, and it doesn't seem to go much further than that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's because we just all instantly critique it and discount it and make it die.
Right.
Maybe that's why. But it does seem to have dramatic impact on those who experience it.
Oh yeah.
Like, it seems to be incredibly potent in the moment of its occurrence and for the people who experience it. And then the potency of that testimony seems to dissipate relatively quickly.
Even for them, you're saying?
No, not for them, but for those who hear the story as it spins out a couple radiuses away.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I would even argue that it even does for them as well.
It can.
Like, human nature shows pretty well that we can forget. We forget quite well. We just move on, and we kind of like...
Well, this one I'm particularly talking about was a woman who was never supposed to walk again, and she does now. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like everything in her world changed in kind of that moment. And she still tells that story as like a pinnacle, profound moment in her life.
Right.
But my sons heard it, and they were like, huh, that's interesting. I don't know where to put that.
Yeah.
Right?
I think most of us don't know where. I mean, I don't know. I mean, here's
Right.
here's the reason why I wanted to.
All right, back to that.
In the name of Jesus, Kirk, I command your knee to be healed. Oh, can't stop me! Can't stop me. Here's why. I don't care. As far as an experiment,
we'll have to check in on that because it may have just been healed.
As far as an experiment, you have to ask what I'm trying to prove. I'm not trying to prove anything as much as it is. Kirk is doing his dancing now that he just did to. No, not quite.
It might be better.
No, is that
okay?
well,
What
to
was
me?
Your,
it's vulnerable to pray.
Okay,
I hate praying for healing. I hate it.
Oh, that's a whole different subject.
I can't stand it because
given that I received that,
it creates cognitive dissonance, and I don't like that very much. And it forces this tension in my life if I'm trying to, the whole Christian thing about that. I don't like that. And it's vulnerable. It makes me feel kind of dumb. Like even like I don't like to do things unless they're going to turn out right or well or the way I intend for them to turn out. Yeah. And especially like trying to be confident about something and then it's just kind of like falling flat on your face. But so there's a tension in there. I don't know. And I'm just curious as to like, I'm more so curious what happens in me when I live in those two realms. One is exploring with quote unquote the miraculous, and one is just sort of letting that be a side issue that is, I don't necessarily need to think or talk about.
I don't have to touch that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is actually one of the things that I have always loved about participating in spiritual environments that actively look for the supernatural and the miraculous and the intervention of God into the very moments that affects our lives in powerful ways is they do build an expectancy around that.
Mm-hmm.
And that impacts my life as well, builds an expectancy in me.
Yeah.
And then they seem to experience it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think we call this faith.
Yes.
Versus spiritual environments who don't expect it, in fact, expect it to not happen, and then they don't experience it.
Yeah.
And those two things in my experience seem to totally go together. So I love being in environments that have this idea of God interacts and intervenes, and we can't explain it, and so we just ask.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean that every time they ask, everything happens they ask for. It means that they do seem to, the kingdom seems to invade earth in a more powerful and present way.
Yes.
And I've always wanted to be, that's the kind of spiritual community that I've always sought.
Right. And then that gets into, I mean, that to me is my experience of LA in a way. And and what comes with that is both the like devastating reality check as well as the kind of pregnant environment of people come here by the millions because they think I'm expecting to get my big break. And then they leave 10 years later going, my big break was being a server for 10 years, and that's fine, but whatever. But a lot of things happen here. A lot of things like crazy things that aren't happening in Ada, Oklahoma or whatever it is.
That's right.
So, but then is that just totally explainable? Just because you've kind of raised people's like cognitive expectancy of like, oh, this thing should happen. Are we just kind of like,
maybe in the acting example, I mean, that you can say that builds an industry, and the industry is looking for things, needs things to happen, so they make things happen, and then you have a probability of, if you've got 1 million people trying to make a movie, chances are, 1,000 movies are going to get made. So you've increased the probability by increasing the failure rate, right?
Right.
Sure, but when it comes to people who couldn't walk and then can, I think we've upped the ante on that one a little bit.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah. All right. So I believe in miracles. I believe that I believe that they get, like every spiritual experience, like everything, we tend to wrap them around our desires and we tend to mold them into our form. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that that's what God's doing with miracles. I do think that I actually think they are for the revelation of God as love.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is, and that God is with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if a miracle won't reveal that, then it won't happen. Well, that's a very declarative statement, but something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I think at some level that's at the center of the universe. And if I can better learn of God's love and God's witness being with me in a desert, then that's the miracle that I would want.
Yeah.
Right? I think that I've come to a place of belief. Actually, this is a Rohr idea, Richard Rohr idea of something about mystery, this idea of mystery, and that miracles occur in ways that it's not so much are they explainable or not. It's that there's a mystery involved, which has to do not mystery being not my lack of understanding, right, or a lack of information. It's that there's so much information that I can't absorb it all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what produces the mystery.
Yeah.
That the revelation of God is so overwhelming that it actually has concealment buried within it. To
Yeah.
put it a different way, I think I heard that first from Peter Rollins. That idea I like a lot better. I think that given enough time, we could probably learn to explain everything. Right? But that's just a way of saying God is all-knowing, or at least God knows everything that's knowable. And if you hang out with God long enough, maybe you'll know it too. Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
So I do believe in all that stuff. The miracle that I'm actually looking for is not one of sort of the classic list of things that we call miracles.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I'm actually pursuing right now in my journey is the one where I can see God at work and experience God in my life in the very small and particularities.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like the Splinter story. He was a small God in that moment to come into this very particular, specific,
and healed me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's another interesting thing. I've become aware in the last 5 or 6 years that I'm getting older. I'm not old yet, but man, can I feel it coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that there's things I can do to slow that down, do that well. It's kind of what we talked about in our last episode of things I might accomplish this year.
Yeah.
But I also can feel that I'm becoming aware of, that's unavoidable, right?
Right.
And the beginnings of facing mortality and those sort of questions. And yet in the midst of that, I feel my soul, my spirit, my self becoming more and more healed.
Mm.
And so there's this interesting posture of I am both becoming unhealthy just because of age, but I'm also being healed partly just because of age.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
That's the miracle I'm looking for.
I like it.
What about you, Jim?
I like believing in miracles, and I do, and it's hard, and I don't. At the same time, it causes me to I like to rely more on my brain. I naturally would like to do that more on what is explainable and understandable to me. And I like that it forces me. I think being bounded in areas is really nice and helpful. Being bounded in our fear, being bounded in our, not
that
bound.
Is well said. Yeah, bracketed, so to speak.
Yeah. And so it's kind of that God aspect of choosing to limit your knowledge or choosing to limit yourself in areas. And for me, it's kind of absurd because I am so limited, but I think I'm not. But being able to say, you know what, you don't need to fully understand that is a really difficult landscape for me to operate in, but really helpful if I can do it well. And I can never be in cruise control in that landscape. I have to really stay engaged, which is nice. And miracles, all the talk around them, all the experience I've had with them keep me in that really like adventurous landscape. and
Yeah.
therefore I want to welcome him into my life. And so, but I also feel we each have a kind of soapbox around certain issues, and one of mine may be, given our history and whatever, is that there's a responsibility with that I feel like is important to acknowledge and what that looks like, and so that's a tension for me.
Yeah.
Is your knee healed, Kirk?
I will tell you in this moment, it does feel better. I will have to walk across the room.
And see this, okay, we almost just opened a can. We'll have to wrap this episode up. This is almost the most frustrating thing that kind of like I think happens around these, like, I pray for healing. It feels a little better. That's almost worse than, I mean, it's great for you. I'm glad it's good, but it kind of makes me go, what is this? What is it? What is it? You know, and okay, so we will check in on Kirk's knee healing. And then whatever that means, I don't know what that means.
All right. So there you go.
This episode was nothing short of a miracle, Kirk.
This podcast, and that we're doing it 2 years later.
It is everything short of a miracle.
Yeah, just keep showing up, right?
There you go.